Okay, welcome back. This is part 2 of just my journey story from nursing school to anesthesia school. Part 1 was just a quick overview of my nursing school process, just some tips for you guys that are in that phase and are just curious of the process and how long it takes and how long you should take, and then just a little bit of getting into the ICU. At the end of the day, all of our journeys are different, so this is just my journey and just experiences I had, and hopefully you can find it helpful too. Anyways, okay, so for part 2, I want to talk about my ICU experience. I want to touch on just my path and my journey, but then also talk about just some tips and what I would recommend in your ICU experience and preparation for anesthesia school. And then I want to talk about CRNA school application process, because everyone talks to me about this. Everyone asks me questions. What should my GPA be? What should my GRE score be? What about my application letter? All this fun stuff. So anyways, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so here's the thing, guys. I feel so fortunate that I was given a chance. I got an incredible opportunity at the ICU I worked at. So like I said in my first video here, I worked just a few months in med-surg until I found a job that gave me a chance, you know? So what I did, I started a job in med-surg. I worked a few months as I was trying to get into the ICU. We kind of had a life change, moved. I found a friend of a friend to recommend me to get into the ICU. They took a chance on me. I think it was a 12-week training program. It was a great just program for, I was still a new nurse. I'd only been working for a couple months in the med-surg. So they did that. I had a one-on-one preceptor. And okay, so I worked in a medical ICU. I have heard a lot of debate on what kind of ICU you should work on to best be prepared for anesthesia school. So let me just tell you, you can do well in anesthesia school no matter your training. Now, you still need to be an ICU level critical thinker. You know, the students in anesthesia school that I've seen struggle are the students that maybe didn't quite put in the effort and time in their experiences as an ICU nurse. You still need to be a critical thinker, do well, a hard worker, be able to manage complex situations and sick patients. I've known girls that were pediatric ICU nurses and did well, that were very specialized. For me, I think it's best to have a broad experience. So the ICU I worked in, I got to do hypothermic therapy. We did bedside CRT, which is a bedside dialysis therapy. We did prone therapy, you know, so a ton of like one-on-one with a lot of really sick patients. So I got to see like a wide spectrum. We did cardiac, we did neuro. My unit ran the hospital's like code responses. You know, I think back to some of the nurses I got to work with. They were leaders. They were, you know, they were kind of like, our unit was the unit that the other units came to and asked to help train them on their thing. The cardiac ICU always asked us to go up and train their nurses on things, the neuro ICU. And I don't say that like, oh, we're great, but I feel like I got to be a part of a unit that had great leaders, great nurses, that were just really on top of things, that cared, that did well. And I really I attribute that to just the nurses and their leadership. And there was never like it was not a hostile environment. It was an incredible environment. It was teamwork. It was always like, hey, what can I do to help you? It wasn't like, well, your patient's dying, but it's my lunch break, so I'm gonna go. It was always like, sometimes none of us would go eat until everyone could eat or everyone had an opportunity to have a break. It was a great environment. And if any of my old coworkers are listening to this, you guys know who you are, and you guys really helped make me who I am, and I'm so appreciative of that. I knew pretty early on that I wanted to be a CRNA, which is hard. It's hard to get invested in something you love. I didn't mention this, but in nursing school, I had a CRNA come to a code in the ICU that I was learning on, and I just will never forget. It was like this chick, she comes in with like her OR attire and it's like a code, and they needed to do a central line, and I think they needed to do a chest tube too. And it was a CRNA that came in, and she was just like a boss, you know, told people what to do, where to go. And I was just like, I want to be you. Who are you? How do I become you? Because that's what I want. I want to do the most. I want the most hands-on. I want to deal with the sickest of the sick. I want to have the most experience. I want to be the person that gets called when the ish hits the fan, like when it is like go time, when you need the best people to respond critically. I want them to call me. So that was my motivation. So all through ICU, when I worked in the ICU, like I wanted the sickest of the sick. You know, they kind of laughed at me because I was always like, they're like, oh, we have this train wreck coming in. They need this. And I'm like, me, please, I'll take them. Like, give me the sickest of the sick. And it was hard sometimes, you know, it was a double-edged sword because you were the busiest, you know, but like, I wasn't the only one who did that. Like, I learned that also from the other nurses I were around. They were all go-getters, hard workers, and I think that was a characteristic that I also learned from them. So I had an awesome ICU experience. So my recommendation to you guys would be, if you can find a decently high-level hospital, like big, where they see a lot of things, I recommend the medical ICU because that's my experience, and it was super beneficial to me. You can do specialized, you can do neuro, you can do cardiac. Benefits of cardiac is we deal with a lot of cardiac stuff in anesthesia. And then neuro, you deal with a lot of probably really unique things, which are super cool too. And then also there's the trauma units. Trauma units, you know, you probably have to learn to just respond super fast. You know, you probably get to learn some cool techniques, kind of more like ER style, which as ICU nurses are like so different from the ER nurses. But ER nurses are ballers too. You know, we all have our own unique specialties. So I would say just go somewhere that's going to get you the most experience, most hands-on. You know, I had someone ask me on Instagram, the only thing I can get is like a step down unit or the ICU at a really small hospital. And that's hard, but I would just say evaluate what's going to give you the most experience, what you're going to see the most. So that would be my advice for the ICU, okay? So I want to move on to anesthesia school, applications, preparations. So think of it like this, guys. You run an anesthesia school, okay? You are looking at everyone's applications, and you have to decide who you want to interview just from paper, okay? So I get a lot of questions on like, what does my GRE have to be? What does my GPA have to be? You know, and I remember being there. I remember thinking those thoughts too. But then at the end of the day, I remember someone telling me, hey, those are just numbers. And what you need to remember is they give you a requirement on their website for a reason. So I think my program, they said you had to be a 3.2 GPA or greater to be competitive. And then a GRE score of, it's been a while, I want to say 310. I can look back at that. You had to be 310 to even be considered, you know? And then they had other things that helped you get there. Your CCRN certification, pretty much any certification, but then just your ICU experience. But let me tell you guys, I had someone tell me this and it really stuck out to me. They said, everyone's gonna be competitive in those areas. Sure, if you're like 4.0, you have like the highest GRE score, whatever, maybe you'll stick out. But for the most part, you're all very smart people, very top of your class. Like, CRNAs are the cream of the crop as far as motivated, go-getters, hardworking, organized, focused. So how do you make yourself seem like, I want to talk to that person, I want to interview them? And I will say, guys, there's some really great resources on Instagram. There's a couple people that I have just kind of started following, and I'm really impressed with how they give you specific tips on how to successfully interview. And I'm gonna just put a couple suggestions here. They haven't asked me to do this. They're just a couple people that I'm personally impressed with. So if you ever want like specific things you can do to maybe make your application process look stronger, go check them out. But for me, my tips would be generally find a way to make yourself stand out. And for me, okay, so just real quick, I'll go over my stats. So my GRE scores, like, I barely made it over the requirements. I think I had a 315, which, like, that was stressful. I was like, I barely made it. I remember having these thoughts like, geez, everyone's gonna be smarter than me. I couldn't do better on my freaking GRE score. Should I take it again? But then I was like, you know what? No, like, they gave me the requirement. That's what I'm sticking with. And let me tell you, studying for the GRE, horrible. I hated it. I can't tell you how many freaking vocabulary cards I made. I hated it so, so much. So y'all have asked how many times should you take the GRE? My advice would be take it one time, get yourself a passing score, and move on. Some people will tell you to take it multiple times. Not my advice. My GPA was so average. I need to look it up specifically. It was between 3.5 and 3.6. Not 4.0, was not like blow your mind, very much average for the applications. And I remember, like, as I was submitting all my stuff, and I'm like, I am so average. I am so average. How are they ever going to give me an interview? And then I'll never forget, I had 3 other coworkers on my same unit that were all in the process of applying to schools. And they were talking about, like, their GRE scores, they're talking about their GPA, they were talking about this, and, like, the one CRNA had 10 years of experience, the other one had like 13 years experience, the other one had like my amount, like a year to 2 years experience. And I was just thinking, like, there is no way I'm gonna get an interview. Like, I am so average, I'm so run-of-the-mill, I've only been working for like a year. But I was like, you know what, no, I'm just gonna do my best. So, but then I got to thinking, and I said, how do I make myself unique? How do I make them want to talk to me? And y'all, I went all in on that letter. Like, my goal was make them have to talk to me, make them want to hear from me, and then I'll convince them in the interview. And that's what I did. I like spent so much time in my application letter. I, talked about my family. I talked about growing up. I talked about being one of 11 kids. I talked about we were extremely poor. At the time, I didn't know about it because I was super happy, but I grew up in a very poor home. I paid for everything myself. From the age 14, I started working as a waitress. I started paying for my phone bill, my car, everything, because, there was no, because that's what life was. I was a hard worker. I was taught hard work, and I was taught everything you want in life, you have to go work and you have to get it. So I paid for my own college. I got to where I was because of my hard work. And I just really poured that out in my letter. And I just talked about, if you guys take a chance on me, I am going to literally be the hardest working student you have. I'm going to show up every day, and I'm never going to quit, and I'm going to give it my all. And I'm going to, I'm going to be a student that your school is going to be proud to put your name on. And I just really sold it in that letter. And I am convinced that's what got me an interview, guys, because I was average. I was run-of-the-mill. So if I had a big tip for anesthesia school, do all the other things. Get your CCRN, get your other certifications, just study for your GRE to do well. At this point, your GPA is probably where you're at. I wouldn't delay super long to just retake a bunch of classes. But I would invest a lot of time in that letter. I had multiple people proofread it. I had like an English teacher tell me how to make it sound better. And most importantly, I had my husband, who literally is like the best critique of writing letters. Anyways, so yeah, just take a lot of time on that. And at the end of the day, if you don't get in your first time, guys, that's okay. Apply to multiple schools. Figure out what you want, where you want to go, where you want to be, and continue to work towards that. So anyways, okay, so that was part 2. I am going to do a whole video on just interviewing and how to do well interviewing. And I also want to just list here a couple other sources of how to do well interviewing, maybe some other perspectives. Again, like I say, these are some people that I've just been impressed with the advice they give to other SRNAs and students out there on how to prep and do well. And they also have like some mentoring, I think, and you can actually pay to do mock interviews and all this fun stuff. So go check them out. Kudos to them for really investing and doing that. So yeah, anyways, okay, so I have part 3, and I broke this up for you guys. I didn't want to make this one long video. I wanted you to kind of get to the sections you wanted to get to. So part 3 is going to be all about anesthesia school, my journey, how I survived, some tips for your surviving. Maybe you are getting ready to go to anesthesia school, or you're in it and you're just like, what am I getting into? And then I also just want to talk about where I am at now, because guys, this is what you're working for. Like the end of the road, I've been through all of it and now I'm done. And you know, it's so funny because I'd have people ask me like, well, would you do it all over again? And I remember people would ask me that when I'm like in school, and I'm like, are you dumb? Why would you ask me this right now? And I'm like, ask me like in a year or two when I'm working and I'm making money and I'm not stressing all the time and I'm having fun. So that's where I'm at now. Reality is, it is long, it is hard, it is stressful, but it is so worth it. And I would do it 1,000 times over. So you guys got this. That's it for part 2. Make sure you check out part 3, where I'm going to talk about all things anesthesia school and then just where I'm at now. So thanks for being here, guys. Bye.